Okay, well, hi everyone, and thank you very much for watching or listening. Liam Hartree here today with another episode of the Simply Inspired podcast. And today I'm truly honored and truly blessed to welcome one of the all-time great professional ultra runners, Sabrina Stanley, who really needs no introduction from me, but I'll give a quick introduction anyway. Obviously, two Hardrock 100 wins, third place in Western States 100 as well, sponsored by Adidas. Sabrina has competed in many of the toughest races in the world. So today we're going to be talking not only about ultra running, but we're also going to be talking about the mindset that it takes to reach such a high level in one of the toughest sports in the world. Sabrina, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for making time for this today. And all I can say is it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us.
Oh, right back at you. I appreciate you reaching out, so I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely wonderful. So, getting into it from the beginning. Now, I don't always go back in time with my guests, but I think we will today go back in time to touch on the beginning of your ultra running journey. I know there's a couple of interesting stories here. So, in terms of your initial inspiration to be a runner, I know now you've spoken very much about how blessed and grateful you are to do what you love full time, like that's on your website and everything. But in terms of where it started, what was your initial inspiration to become an athlete and to take up running in the beginning?
So running just in general, I was in high school. We were at team camp in basketball, and a girl from another team said she ran 7 miles every day, and I thought that sounded impossible. So I went home and I started running just a touch further and just to see if it was possible. And yeah, found that I really, really enjoyed it and made that kind of a daily habit of my own. And then it progressed, and a few years later, I was doing half marathons and then into full marathons. This is all road running. And then for ultras, I moved to Colorado and was in a mountain town where there weren't a lot of roads that were runnable, that were safe. And so I just started running trails, not really knowing it was a sport. Um, and ended up putting my name in for Leadville 100. My name got drawn from the lottery, and that kind of started the trajectory to I really enjoy this and I think I can be really good at it and competitive. And so, how do I craft this skill into something that I can do as a career and just kind of like hone it to be as good as I possibly can? And so that kind of started a passion and the ball rolling to get me to where I am today.
Wow, absolutely incredible, absolutely amazing. And I love that because see, everything I talk about comes from the point of view of inspiration and motivation and giving people that hope. So it's very cool to see how you started because everyone looks at where you are now, but they don't always see the humble beginnings. On that topic, as I understand it though, your first 100-mile run didn't necessarily go according to plan. Now, as I say, with this, I don't dwell on any negativity in my interviews at all. The reason I bring this up is obviously the fact that you regrouped, learned from that, and bounced back. But when the first one didn't go according to plan, more than what actually happened, how did you sort of take that as a challenge, take that as a lesson, and come back to go again, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so the first one, I made it 87 of the 100 miles and got timed out and walked away from that, I would say pretty injured. Just an overuse injury because my training was not where it should have been. My knowledge of how to race in terms of pacing, nutrition, just was ground zero when I went into that event. And so when I walked away from it, I knew that there was all these different categories that I could vastly improve upon. But I did take a break from running a little bit and moved states and kind of pursued something else for a little bit. Really missed long distance running, and like there's just this voice in the back of my head saying that I could be good at it. And so I put my name in again for the same race in the lottery, and my name was drawn again. And so I said, all right, I am gonna dedicate everything I can to make my training perfect. I'm going to learn about nutrition and pacing and mindset going into this race. And so when I do it again, I hope that I will finish and have a better performance in the first time. And luckily, all that came to fruition and it worked out well. Um, so yeah, I think I just walked away with it with a bunch of like, these are some lessons that I could focus on and hope to learn from.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, it shows people who are chasing their dreams and goals in life, whatever those dreams and goals may be, that things don't always start off 100% rosy, but if you work on it, you can get there. Now, we'll come into some more races in just a minute now, but before we do, you mentioned about making this a career, obviously, as you now have, and you mentioned just now about having that goal quite early on in terms of, right, okay, this is what I want to do. I need to craft my life around this and everything. I'd like to delve a little bit deeper into the steps that you took initially to do that in terms of obviously being very good at running is one thing, and we'll touch on the races, as I said, but in terms of making it a career, making it a lifestyle, I think this is relevant for people who are chasing their own dreams and goals in one way or another. What were some of the steps you took to make it full time in the beginning, please?
Yeah, so I quit my normal job and I moved back to Colorado. I took a job. I don't really remember if it was minimum wage, but if it wasn't, it was close to. It was like definitely a pay cut. I started working at a local running store that specialized in trail running. So I was fully in that culture. I started a long run group on Sundays and reached out to a couple different people to learn how to run from them. Um, and yeah, I'm just started like as much as I could, making as many sacrifices as possible. Like any free time, I was either training or listening to podcasts or Googling information, studying the race route, driving to the race course to get my feet on it. Just every aspect of it, I immersed myself into. So there was like no minute of the day where I wasn't reading, listening, doing something that involved getting better at that sport. And then once I had a few decent results under my belt, I started reaching out to some companies for originally just like product and maybe a little bit of funding. And as I accumulated some of those smaller companies or smaller contracts, I started attracting like medium fish and then big fish, and so it kind of was just a natural progression to running for Adidas full time.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's incredible. The way you've, as I say, the way you've crafted that, the way you're living your dream. Now, when we come to certain races themselves, obviously you've had a lot, and I'd love to talk about them all, but I think we'd be here until sometime next week, or we'd be here too long. So the way I usually do this with people who've accomplished as much as you have is condense it down to some of your personal favorites. Now, obviously, I can imagine that certain ones will come up and certain ones will be more relevant, as I mentioned in the intro. But I never assume that, because when I ask this question, different people come back with different things. So, in terms of some of your favorite races, in terms of your performance, but also in terms of other aspects, in terms of maybe the location where the race was taking place, maybe the people you met along the way, it's not always as linear as just a good win, although that might come into it. So, basically, just to give that a few mentions, maybe a handful of mentions of your personal highlights, what you regard as your personal highlights, please.
Yeah, oh, that's a difficult question. Because
Big question,
they're
sorry.
all, yeah, it's like picking your favorite child. I mean, because there's some races where the course is insanely beautiful and you just don't perform on it, and there's some where mentally your training block wasn't where it should have been, and then the race ends up amazing. And so like there's like mixed emotions with like how with that race. And um yeah, I would say I feel like this is not the expected answer, but one of my all-time favorite races that I did was and I'd say there's a couple like this. Like a 50 miler that just like goes really well. I wouldn't say 50 milers are my strong suit, but for some reason, I've had a lot of really fun days racing that distance. So I did one in Georgia called Cruel Jewel, and I just felt like start to finish, I never ever hit a low point, which is unheard of in the sport. Like there's always going to be some point in the race where you just fall apart. And I never like got off course or anything. Like it was just in my mind a perfect race start to finish. And I don't think I can say that with such certainty about any other race out there. So yeah, Cruel Jewel 50 miler is one of my favorites. I just did a race, the closest race I've ever done to my hometown where I grew up, and so all my family could come. That was a really special event for me. It was also a 50 miler called Hell's Bells, and it was at the base of Mount St. Helens. So that was just it was like in an environment that I grew up in terms of the landscape. So I really enjoyed that as well. And then if you're talking like more prestigious stuff, I had a really fun day when I ran Western a few years back. It yeah, I wouldn't say my training block going into that was as strong as I wanted it to be, but the race itself, I felt I executed really, really well. Um, yeah, then you have races like Hardrock where my second time doing it, it feels very like gray and sterile in a really good way in terms of just like it was clean, like I feel like I went in there, I did the job I wanted to, but it was very like business-like and serious. And so like they all have their own kind of like personalities and characteristics that are special in their own way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you narrowing that down a little bit because as I was saying, it was one of the best ways I could think of to sort of condense so many races, so many stories. I mean, with an interview of this length, we are only going to scratch the surface really, but getting some highlights is still a wonderful thing. Now, obviously, one thing to touch on here before we go into more of the mindset stuff or a couple of other race things. When it comes to the Hard Rock 100 wins and everything, I'd like to just give a quick mention to basically your key memories from the race. You mentioned just now about the grey environment, and you touched on that. I'd like to go a little bit deeper into that because that's one of the ones that comes up over and over again. Basically, just the races in your own words, the things that stick with you, the things that you enjoyed most. Maybe, if anything didn't go to plan, we can talk about how you overcame that. But basically, the Hard Rock, in your own words, I think is one that just really deserves to be touched on.
Yeah, so I feel like the second time I did Hardrock, I went into it with at that time the best training plan I'd ever put together or training block. I felt very prepared heading into it. I mean, I knew every split. I knew how fast I could run it in the race on tired legs. I knew my nutrition, like just top to bottom. I felt I went to that race more prepared than I'd ever been for any other event. Um, Mentally, I was stronger than I'd ever been going into that event. Like I was certain I was going to win that day. And I would say I executed that all the way up until, oh, let's say like mile 80-ish. And then mile 80, man, I don't know what time. It was middle of the night and you're at the top of this climb and you have a couple climbs left. And I would say that's when like the effort started to catch up to me a little bit more and things kind of came off the rails as they do in hundreds. And so I look at that as like I would say a 90% if I were to grade it from training to like race day. And I look back at those last 20 to 18 miles and I'm like, man, like I would like to do it again and push that much harder, and um just there's room for improvement there that I'm still hungry for. So although I came away with a win and a time that I'm really proud of, I still in my own way I'm a perfectionist, and to like truly walk away from that and like not want to come back, I think I'd have to nail it start to finish, and I have not done that in my mind yet.
Absolutely. Well, I love that because as well as the race itself, obviously we get into little bits and pieces there that people don't see from the outside looking in, go a little bit deeper into the mindset. Now, you mentioned about a couple of things there to do with the mindset topics, to do with the fact that you were certain you would have a win, the preparation, this type of thing. So touching on that a little bit, obviously the physical training is super important, but there's a very, very strong mental element to ultra running, obviously, in terms of a number of different aspects. When it's getting close to a race or when you're on the build up to a race, we'll touch on the physical side, but in terms of the mental side or even the emotional side, what is your preparation like? I mean, what's sort of going through your head on the build up to a big race in terms of visualizing, in terms of any mental techniques that you personally use that people may find valuable, if that makes sense, you know?
Yeah, I know this isn't available to everyone, but for me, I like to be on that race course as much as I possibly can. And then when I'm on the race course, previous to being up there, I like to look up splits that I think that I can accomplish that other runners of my that I think I'm equal to, or even runners that I think are maybe a little bit better and strive for those splits. And so I'll break down those splits and try to hit them during my training day and see how possible that is, and then kind of adjust my expectations accordingly. And so just as much data as I can get and as much real time on ground practice I can get, the better. It leaves me kind of with, I don't know, just like the more prepared you are heading into it. And then when you are on course, you can visualize like, okay, this is going to be mile whatever, and I'm probably going to be really hungry at this point, or it's going to be dinner time, or what's the heat going to be like? Is it going to be the middle of the night? And then, if it's getting closer to the finish line, if there's somebody next to me, am I going to be having to run a lot harder than I want to here to like actually race to the finish here? Or where should I be sitting back and being calm if I'm not in a spot where I want to be? And where should I be pushing? And so just really visualizing that while you're in real time on the course, I think is a huge advantage. And if you don't have that, then you can kind of fake it. And if you have a treadmill, be like, okay, this climb is going to be 3 miles, and kind of like outline your treadmill climbs and descents the way that they will be in the race. Or if you're out on a trail, just listening to podcasts and figuring out, like recreating it as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And Sabrina, what's really cool about that is obviously it's something that people can apply to different life areas as well. So, even though this is very beneficial to runners listening to this, it's a very universal topic. People can apply things like that to business, to education, to other sports. So, very, very valuable content. Now, another thing to touch on here in terms of the mindset, and I'm sure people talk to you about this a lot, but in terms of the concept of the pain barrier or the concept of, pushing through that pain and discomfort or those low points when they come again, like I said earlier, not dwelling on any negativity, but very much the side of how you push through that. People talk about it. I've heard the cave of pain being mentioned, and I've heard these different things. But in terms of how you push through it, what are your techniques for that personally, please?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of expect it to come almost like, I mean, you're running 100 miles, and so it's gonna happen. And I don't really view it as, let's say, a cave, but just like a tunnel. Like you're gonna go through it, and you have to just keep going because there is an end in sight, even if you can't see it. And then I truly believe that for every low, you're gonna have the opposite high. And so when I am in those lows, it's kind of like bring it on, like kind of like Lieutenant Dan on top of the ship in Forrest Gump, like just bring it on as much as you can and make it as worse as possible, because that means the opposite high will be that much better. I mean, ideally you run a race even keel the whole time, but if you do have a crash, you can kind of find solace in the fact that at some point, if you just keep moving forward, and that's the key, you have to keep moving forward no matter how much pain you are in mentally or physically. And there is another side to that. And so get in as many calories as you can. If you're throwing up, get it out and put more back in. But you got to keep problem solving and just one foot in front of the other. And if you're walking, you are stopped in your tracks or made to go to a walk because you're in so much pain or you're throwing up. If you decide like in every 5 minute or 10 minute interval, like you're gonna go from a walk to like a slow shuffle, from a slow shuffle to a slow jog, from a slow jog to like a little bit faster jog, and like keep extending that gait out, your muscles will warm back up no matter how much they feel like they won't. And so just give it time, and keep advancing at whatever pace works for your body, but you have to believe that putting in that time will make you run again. But you can't just like stop and walk the whole thing because that will, then your muscles will get even more stiff. And so you got to keep pushing for that next step.
Absolutely, yeah. It makes a lot of sense. It does make a lot of sense. And it's as I say, I'm sure it's something people talk to you about a lot, but again, it's a valuable life lesson that people can use for other things. Now, shortly we'll come to the future and we'll come to a couple of other topics about your life. But obviously we're focusing on the races themselves very much here. I'm curious to get into how being a runner and being a professional athlete has influenced you in other areas of your life. So what I mean by this is obviously the discipline, the perseverance, the confidence. I don't know which areas it'll be in, but in terms of like how you've grown as a person when you're dealing with family, when you're dealing with friends, when you're dealing with other areas of your life, not to probe into anything personal here by any means, but just in terms of how being a runner has improved you as a person outside of running, if that makes sense, I think is a quite a valuable topic to talk about, maybe something that people don't touch on as often.
Yeah. Well, I would say, although I can be like a fiery person sometimes, I would say that in general, I've been through like so much in my racing that it's made me a much calmer and collected person outside of it. So in like emergency situations, I feel very cool and collected. Like we got hit by a semi one time and it was just kind of like it's gonna be okay, like just I don't know. It seems in like high stress situations, I'm not a panicker. And I think that comes from the practice of racing and just problem solving constantly. That, like what is the next step instead of all chaos is broken loose and like hecticness. Instead, like I feel I'm very good at like swimming through that hectic energy and staying under control in that.
Yeah, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I can imagine how that would cross over, and it's a good thing to touch on because it shows the human side, not just the athlete side of things as well. On that topic, when it comes to staying calm in those situations, when it comes to the concept of the toughest races in terms of possibly in terms of the terrain. But to be honest with you, when I talk to people about this, a lot of times it's actually something that's going on in their life outside of the race that you have to focus through and everything. But the reason I get into this is obviously different races describe themselves as being very tough, and there's different arguments on which ones are tougher than others. But obviously Hardrock, obviously I think you've done the Hurt 100, and there's different ones that stand out as being regarded as very difficult like that. So in terms of that, again, not the negative side, but the positive side of how you push through it, which races would you regard to be the most challenging of your career so far in one way or another, as I say, if it's the terrain, but also if it's something else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I did Grand Raid last October, and I would say that was the most challenging race I've ever done. It's the first time I've ever pulled myself from the race and not been timed. I was timed out at my first 100 miler, and Grand Raid is the very first time I willingly took myself out of a race. Again, mile somewhere in the 80s. And that was, I would say, the most challenging decision I've ever had to come to. Um, yeah, and in terms of like difficulty of a race, there's a famous saying about dogs that everybody thinks they have the best dog in the world, and they're all correct. Nobody's wrong. And everywhere I've ever raced, every local community of runners says they have the hardest trails. And I would agree that every local community does have the hardest trails. Like everyone is so proud of how like humid it is there, or the roots or the rocks or the steepness or the descents will kill you, whatever it is that they're proud of their local trails. Like you can find something that is a challenge to each and every runner in its own way. And then I mean, even a 24-hour track race is going to be really hard in its own way. And so a 5K is sometimes feels impossible to redline it the entire time. So it's just how hard you push yourself, and yeah, you can make any event what you want it to be. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with it, but you could essentially hike an entire 100 miler and make it as easy as you want it to be. So, yeah, each race offers its own unique set of circumstances that you kind of have to fight through that make it challenging.
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. I was curious because of obviously the amount of races you've done and everything, but I like that answer. It makes a lot of sense. Now, as we move into the future topics, you mentioned earlier about being a perfectionist, about still having that hunger to do better, and I think we were talking about hard rock at that time. And you mentioned, these sorts of future goals. So, in terms of your future goals, running specific, later on, I'm going to touch on the coaching and a couple of things shortly, but just in terms of running specific, basically what the future holds for you. I don't mind how far ahead in time we go. That's entirely up to you, but just what is lighting the fire inside of you and what you're aiming for from this point forward, basically.
Yeah, so right now, let's see, it's Wednesday. I am not this Friday, but the following Friday, I'll be racing UTMB for the first time. So that's, I would say, in the immediate future. I have not raced it before. Really excited to stand on the start line there and get that underway. After that, man, long-term goals. I would like to go back to Western. I would like to go back to Leadville. Um, yeah, there's so many different races out there that are just on my bucket list. And I feel like when you put things in the universe, there's some unspoken like now you're committed to it. But at one point I would love to like run across America or do some like Antarctica stuff, like just traveling long distance is really intriguing to me and setting some FKTs in that regard. Maybe when I'm less competitive at 100 milers in, I don't know, hopefully a decade or so. So hopefully I can be competitive in 100 milers for a while. I haven't approached the 200-mile race world yet, and so there are some races there that I would also like to give a go at. Um, but I would say right now, in like the immediate to near future, like the next 5 to 10 years, I will probably stay in the 100-mile range and kind of perfect that as long as I can, and do some bigger name races and just see what kind of times I can put up there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's great to give that a mention as well in terms of everything you've already achieved, but the hunger is there, the fire is there, so there's some great things yet to come. Now, as we move into the latter phase of this talk today and a couple of other things, when I was researching for this, obviously, I was having a look at your website and I was having a look around at different things. And in terms of coaching runners, there's some references on there to you doing that. Now you'll have to enlighten me a little bit on this, but can you share with us a little bit about what you do in terms of coaching or in terms of passing on some of your knowledge to other people in the sport and that type of thing, please?
Yeah, I work with a handful of runners. I would say my specialty is 100-mile distance, and it's not like an it's not, I would say my athletes don't truly reflect this, but I really enjoy working with women, and I do work with a handful of them, but I enjoy working with women and setting goals, helping them set goals and get to that 100-mile distance and then accomplishing it. Yeah, and so I just set up training plans for them. We discuss it. It's all online. And yeah, I'd say it's very a traditional ultra running online coaching methodology.
Yeah, but that's brilliant though. I mean, it's brilliant that you're giving back your knowledge and your wisdom and the lessons you've learned along the way to people. That's a wonderful thing to be doing. So, pretty much the last topic that I like to close out with, I like to close out with thank yous. And what I mean by that is obviously we were just talking now about your coaching and how you're helping other people. In terms of people who've helped you along the way, and in terms of anyone you'd like to give a mention to, who's contributed to your journey in one way or another. Obviously, this can come in the form of, say, Adidas, who sponsor you, but this can also come in the form of any other type of thing. People who've given you advice, people who've helped you train. It's not, again, it's not a linear thing. It comes in different forms, but just anyone you'd like to thank who's contributed to your journey along the way, basically.
Yeah, well, and going back to the athletes I coach, I feel like they are inspiring me as well. Sometimes when I'm not looking forward to going out for a run and I know that they have a long run that day or they're doing a race or whatever, I'm like, they're out there in the pouring rain or depending on where they are in the world, or it's super, super hot and they're still getting in their training. And that kind of inspires me as well to get out. Um, I mean, I have a brother who has been to almost all my races as a crew member. And yeah, so he has been there from like the very, very start, going to my road half marathons and marathons and stuff. And um, I mean, everybody in my family has, they show their support. When I started working at the running store, my boss Dean, he became like my biggest champion, and anybody that came in the running store would hype me up. And this was before I had any results, and he would tell them that I'm going to win Leadville one day, and has also been there for, along the ride for crew. My partner of I don't know how many years, Avery, we trained together for 7 years, like we have been to races all over the world together. And so he was a big part of this journey as well. I mean, the list goes on forever. I could name friends all night. So I'll throw Kate is another girlfriend that comes to and crews a lot of my events. Yeah, so man, if anybody listens to this and I didn't name you, I feel really guilty. But yeah, there's been so many people along the way that have been big supporters.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, I can imagine it is a long list, so sorry for putting you on the spot there, but it's nice to give people a mention who are doing good work behind the scenes. They're not always recognized for their achievements. I know I said that was the last thing. One other small thing I just need to mention, otherwise I'll kick myself if I don't. But obviously, working with Adidas, they've made a lot of things possible for you as a sponsor and everything. But can you just share with us a couple of words of what it's like working with them as a company, as an organization, what that means to you? And then that's pretty much it then, Sabrina. We'll wrap it up after that, but we need to give them a quick mention, please.
Yeah, no, Adidas has been awesome. As in the trail running world, I would say they're investing in their trail athletes more than any other company, to my personal experience. We are able to come over and train on the UTMB course. I came out here 6.5 weeks early. I have been put up in a team chalet. There's a couple of them here. A few weeks before the race, they bring out some chefs, and so breakfast, lunch, and dinner are provided for us. Um, we have a PT on hand that's been here since I got here 6 weeks ago. And so we can schedule PT sessions every day. The 2 weeks leading up to the race, they have a sports psychologist on hand that you can schedule sessions with, so you can talk to him. Yeah, so just, and then obviously more gear than I know what to do with. I feel like I need to get a house that has like a full room of just gear. And I try to give it out to as many friends and family members as I can. So yeah, just top to bottom, they make sure that we're taken care of and are able to get to the race line with the equipment we need, and mentally and physically, and nutrition, and just the whole 9 yards for these big events like this. And then if there's smaller events you want to do, they help out there as well. So yeah, it's kind of been a really cool thing to be a part of. And then if there's athletes not doing those races, they're typically, depending on the event, here to support you as well. So like Western States, I was there and I was able to crew Taylor Nolan, who came in sixth, I believe, in an incredible time. Like, I think is the fastest female year on record. And so just having team members show up and either crew you or pace you or cheer you on along the way at these big team get-togethers is something that's kind of unseen in the trail running world currently.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, great to give them a mention and the way they've helped you. I'd like to thank you very much for your time with this, Sabrina, in terms of we've got a nice mix of topics here. We've got the fun stories and some recollections from the races, but we've also gone a little bit deeper and we've got some knowledge and some inspiration that I think will inspire and help people, other runners and people in other walks of life as well, which is the reason why I do these at the end of the day. So I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'd also like to thank you for sharing everything you shared about your life so openly and everything like that, and for fitting this in on the run up to UTMB as well. That's also much appreciated. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a nice chat.
Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.